1 week season.
Welcome to Solo Ship Week 11. I'm Squirrel Patrol. I'm joined by JM to win from 1 week season. JM, I was totally wrong in my thesis last week. My general theory for the week was I'm gonna spend up on Saquon Barkley, spend up on Justin Jefferson. It was terrible. I was actually surprised that I didn't lose more money, especially in multi-entry. I was like looking at my line, I was like I'm losing half my entry fees, but it should be like zero, right? Or it should be 100%. And I think there was actually a lesson to be learned was that I actually did go way underweight the Bears defense, and they were like 40% owned in some contests, like 30% owned in other contests. Then we put up 4 fantasy points. I had a bunch of defenses that put up double-digit points, and I think that extra 6 points actually helped my lineups a lot, and particularly in single entry, I guess. But yeah, how was your week?
Yeah, very similar actually. I this week in our Winner Circle podcast, which is for those of you who are not subscribers, it's a midweek podcast where we do look at macro DFS strategy and theory through the lens of the week behind or the week ahead. And so this week I was breaking down some of my single entry 3 max rosters and just talking through the roster construction. But the first roster I selected for breaking down, as I was breaking down before the show, I was realizing it had Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and Justin Jefferson. And the thinking was, most people won't have 2 of these guys together. Nobody's going to have 3 of these guys together. And like we talked last week, Justin Jefferson probably wasn't scoring 30 to 35 points, but even 25, if you were getting good value, would be really valuable. And it was literally, it was a single entry contest. It was a spin move. It was like a 350 entry single entry contest, $300 buy-in. And it was literally if Saquon and Justin Jefferson had combined for 50 points, I would have won that contest. Because nobody in front of me, hardly anyone in front of me had Saquon, hardly anyone in front of me had JJ. Nobody had them together. And it was they combined for 16 points, and again, game environment matters for Jefferson, but literally each of them had their single best individual matchup of the year. Saquon last night comes right back into another 140 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. So yeah, just a weird week where it was the things that allowed me to get to these high priced guys all hit. It was the high priced guys, the high confidence plays that kind of fell apart.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that gift with the stick or whatever, where it's just do something, right? I'm just watching the games, waiting for Saquon or Justin Jefferson to just do something. But they didn't. And yeah, one of the quirks of recording the show on Fridays is it's after Thursday Night Football. I already know it's just a week too early on Saquon. But obviously different matchups and different ownership, but still frustrating. But we move on to week 11. I think we have 11 games on DraftKings and 12 games on FanDuel, including the Sunday night game, which I believe is Cincinnati and the Chargers. I guess we actually have some higher totals. We even have a team with a implied point total over 30 points. Is there any particular game environment that jumps out at you for the week, or just initial impressions for the week?
Yeah, game environments are really dependent on both teams, right? And this is kind of another week where some teams are expected to score points, but not in a way that stimulates passing volume. And then we've got, the NFL has shifted so heavily towards split backfields that if we have a team like the Lions is expected to score over 30 points, but it's not because you're gonna have to pass the ball a bunch. It doesn't, Jahmyr Gibbs could be a play that you need to have, or at least a really useful piece, but it doesn't guarantee that somebody from this offense is putting up the type of score that you'd want. Literally the Lions can come out of with no individual player scoring more than 24 DraftKings points. I wouldn't be surprised. That's probably the favorite outcome. And then the underdog outcome is for somebody to top 24 DraftKings points from this offense. So yeah, another week like this where, there's some high scoring opportunities, but they're not really in game environments that you expect to be, back and forth type setups. And then we don't really have many clear back and forth type setups. We've got some competitive games, but maybe not ones where the scoring gets stimulated. So yeah, it's another interesting, strange week. I think we'll have another low scoring week in DFS, not as low scoring as last week because it's kind of historic, but just kind of the way things are shaping up.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys on the line. I think your analysis is right on the Detroit-Jacksonville game. It's a 14-point spread. There's a good chance the Lions don't really need to do a whole much, right? They just control the game. Jacksonville can't get anything going. I have some interest in David Montgomery. I'm seeing Jahmyr Gibbs kind of projected as a higher owned running back, and it's tough for Montgomery to pay off his price. He is minus 260 for a touchdown. His odds for 2 touchdowns aren't that terrible. I think in the multi-entry, he should probably be owned at his percent chance of getting 2 touchdowns. And I don't think even owning him in single entry is like out of the field, out of the realm of sanity, I guess. He has double digits DraftKings points in 9 to 10 games. He has a reception in every game this season. He's by far the most likely player on the slate to score a touchdown. He's probably not putting up an outlier score, but he will if he puts up 3 touchdowns. So maybe I think you can go there. I think there's some safety as well in Montgomery. I have some interest in pairing him with the Lions defense. I also have a lot of interest in Jameson Williams. He's averaging over 20 yards per reception this season. Jags give the 7th most yards per catch. So like that seems like, and he's not a guy that needs volume, right? Like he can just take it to the house. So there's a good chance that the Lions aren't passing the ball a lot. Jameson Williams is the guy that doesn't need them to pass the ball a lot. And he's like kind of oddly or like uncomfortably priced. So he's not going to pop off the page when you're looking at median projections. I have heard like some people talk him up, but I'm probably right there with him that he's a player I'm interested in.
Yeah, when I did the Angles podcast today, I was, we kind of take like a macro view of the slate and that and try to figure out what like the picture on the puzzle box looks like. And I was going through the 4 offenses that I'm going to have in my build arounds section in the player grid, and then kind of poking holes in all 4 of those offenses to illustrate like even the places where we're going to express the most confidence in our builds have a lot of question marks on them, right? So then I went through some of the sub 10% projected owned wide receivers and sub 5% projected owned wide receivers just to illustrate like, these guys don't stand out on paper, but this could be a week where things that don't stand out on paper actually end up winning you a tournament. And Jameson Williams was one of the guys I highlighted there and spoke specifically to that of like, we know how the Lions are going to play, right? They've topped 25 pass attempts twice, and both of those were driven by game environment. So against the Jags, Mac Jones, they're probably not throwing more than 25 times, but Jameson Williams doesn't need 10 or 11 targets in order to hit. And so that kind of brings him in as a guy who, like range of outcomes is broad, but the ceiling is there for tournaments.
Yeah. I'll throw in another player some interest in from this game, Evan Ingram. Just the Lions give up the fourth most receptions per game in the NFL. It's kind of a weaker position at tight end. It's a possibility. So I think they split the tight end work. I kept seeing like Brenton Strange kind of show up on the game, play by play as I'm watching it. But if Ingram, gets in there for a bunch of receptions, he could pay off his tight end price at a position where there's not a huge opportunity cost. I guess moving on, like another. Well, I guess if you have any Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I might have a hard time playing tight ends priced close to Kelsey this week because it's going to be like a competitive game, and that the Bills, because of the way he functions in this offense, like it's all short area work, right? And so it's the same thing last year. I remember like hearing some people be like, why aren't teams selling out to stop Kelsey? And it's like, why would you? Because as soon you can't stop him with one guy. As soon as you dedicate 2 guys to stopping him, you open yourself up to like big plays downfield. So teams are generally comfortable being like, look, if they're going to throw a bunch of 6 and 8 yard passes to Kelsey, like we have to live with that, right? And so I see in a game like this is such a critical game for the Bills. For the Chiefs and for the Bills, but I see this as one of these games where it's like, oh, he probably sees 10 plus targets again. He might see 14 plus targets again. So it's hard for me to go to other tight ends in that price range, but I do like any player who has ceiling and doesn't stand out on paper this week. I like them. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I think this is a week where some players who don't stand out on paper and have ceiling are going to be on tournament winning rosters. So at first I was like, ooh, I like that Evan Ingram call. And then I was like, I don't think I'll pull the trigger on it because Kelsey's right there. But yeah, no, I like plays like that this week. And I think that's kind of the way to think about this slate is who are the like 2 or 3 plays that people are not going to be on that I want to add onto my roster with like kind of my more confident, comfortable plays.
So a couple other like kind of glamour game environments. Baltimore and Pittsburgh is actually the game that probably stands out to me the most that I want to have some interesting game stacking. I'm surprised that ownership isn't going there more than it is. That things can change by Sunday. But yeah, the Ravens give up like a litany of passing game statistics, most receptions per game, most I think yards per reception, most receiving touchdown, anything that's like passing related. The Ravens are just giving it up. And people don't like to click on Russell Wilson, but yeah, you might end up being my highest owned quarterback. And actually, I have a lot of interest in Lamar Jackson as well. Jackson's like destroying every other quarterback, especially on this slate in terms of fantasy points per game. And he's like only $200 more than Josh Allen, I think, on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Lamar Jackson is outscoring him tremendously. I think he's probably matchup proof to some extent.
Yeah.
Like Steelers aren't necessarily like the team I'd want to play him against, but he's also not going to see a lot of ownership at his price tag. So I want to be over the field on Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson's actually a really interesting single entry play because he's not going to see a lot of ownership. And you're just hoping that some of the other chalk fails, right? Because that's going to be a very different lineup construction. But I want to be over the field on Russell Wilson as well. George Pickens, Calvin Austin. I'll probably be over the field on Derrick Henry in multi-entry. Like, it's not a really good matchup. I expect Henry's going to see very low ownership as well. So, like, if he's owned at 5%, I would have maybe owned him at 10%. But yeah, I guess your thoughts on Ravens and Steelers.
Yeah, I'll start with the Steelers side. Highest opponent pass play rate is the big thing with the Ravens. Like, they're bad against the pass, but then also you can't run against them, so that helps that much more. And obviously, we know like Arthur Smith isn't going to be like, all right, let's have Russ throw it 42 times. But if he gets out of that 28 attempt range up to like 36, 37, I think there's a lot of value here in this spot. And this, we looked at it last week, but the Steelers offense has been good with Russell Wilson, like legitimately good with Russell Wilson. And so, I love this spot with all the pass catchers you named. I also like Mike Williams because, Mike Williams plays 40 snaps this week instead of 10 snaps this week. That's an opportunity for him to see 4 to 6 downfield targets. So if everybody's going to be on Kayshon Boutte for 6 downfield targets, which I like that play in a vacuum. Like, I like that play before I looked at ownership, because that's the type of play we're typically hunting for at this time of year, is like, who sees 5 to 6 targets downfield and can hit for big plays, right? And that doesn't mean he can't hit, but it's like, also, he's not the only guy down there who is going to see 5 or 6 targets and can hit for big plays. Calvin Austin and Mike Williams are also in that bucket. So I like that. And then, same thing when I was looking through who doesn't stand out on paper but can win you a tournament this week. It was Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers. Like, Lamar to Zay Flowers, it was like that was one of the two spots outside of wide receiver that I focus on was, like you said, kind of matchup proof. And if the Ravens control this game, we don't get the Lamar Jackson blow up, because I think it's critical to think about how the Ravens are going to look at this game. Russell Wilson Wilson games are like NBA games. Doesn't matter what the score is in the first or second quarter. It's always going to be close in the fourth quarter. So the Ravens aren't necessarily going to be like, hey, let's get aggressive and score as many points as we can, because then you just turn things over to like, okay, now Russ is going to throw moon balls and eventually it's going to be close. So I think that the Ravens, they want to control this game. They probably won't be super aggressive, but if the Steelers are doing well, it creates this back and forth type of thing. So I think like Lamar has to be played. There's some stacks that you can play without the bring back, right? Like, I think Lamar has to be played with the bring back, because you need the Steelers to be stimulating this game environment. But if they do, I'm not that concerned about Lamar in this matchup. It's more about like what the overall game environment looks like. And if the overall game environment elevates, then Lamar can hit for a tournament winner.
So Kayshon Boutte wins the award for the guy I didn't know yesterday. I'm probably going to be playing a lot of in my lineups on Sunday. I just wrote down some names. Like, literally one of the things I wanted to talk about, like, guys we could play instead of Kayshon Boutte. And I agree. Like, I don't think I'm going to be playing him. He's 3,500. But it's like I have Calvin Austin written down, Tim Patrick, Curtis Samuel, Khalif Raymond, like guys we can play instead of Kayshon Boutte. I think, like, for multi-entry, I think it's probably a good idea to like maybe spread out your exposure, because I think Boutte's going to see a lot of ownership. But I have some interest in that game as well. So I think we can go to, like, do you have any like super value wide receivers, Kayshon Boutte replacements?
Yeah, well, I didn't flip over the cards and look at ownership until this morning, and then I was like, oh, come on, like, because I do think he's like the sharpest play of the bunch down there, but not like dramatically sharper than other plays. And I expected to flip over the cards and see him at like 3 or 4% owned, and then it's like, oh, cool, I'll have him on 10% of my rosters. So when you look and it's like, oh, the field is expressing confidence in him, I don't love that. I think the Patriots they're adapting their offense, right? And they're like, okay, like these downfield shots to him are part of what we want to do. His ADOT is like 18 over the last 3 weeks. So he's seeing these downfield throws. It's not just 6 targets per game across the last 3 weeks, but yeah, Calvin Austin's also 4 to 6 targets every game. I think for me, it's like, where can we pay up a little bit more, right? There's not any other guys below 4K that stand out as better options. But if we go up a little bit higher, you've got Elijah Moore, who's like a much better option. You got Rashad Bateman, who sees the same target share as Kayshon Boutte on downfield throws. You have Mike Williams, who again I think could see 4 to 6 targets in this one. So to me, that's kind of the how you handle it is like, is there somebody else besides Calvin Austin? Is there somebody else below 4K who profiles similarly? I don't actually think so. Tim Patrick probably sees like 2 targets. He's got 0, 2, 1, 2, 3. Curtis Samuel is going to see stuff like close to the line of scrimmage, but I think that there's guys just a little bit more expensive. You pay a little bit more to actually just build a better roster is how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking like Jalen Polk is still there. I think he's cheaper than it's probably going to be somewhat random which one of those guys puts up a higher score. I mean, and I think a lot of like median projections go off of like snap share and things like that. But yeah, I may just raise like Jalen Polk's projection to be about Kayshon Boutte's, and that should should reduce the amount of Boutte that I get. And there's some leverage there, I think. Do you have any interest in that game? I think it's an interesting game. I was surprised. I was looking up that Drake May is the league leader in yards per carry this season of anybody that has 25 or more carries. But I think he's going to see some ownership as well. But I'll probably be there at least with the field, and I think it's a decent play for single entry as well. If you're, maybe if you play Boutte, you want to be playing Drake May as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like that shout. Yeah, no, I like. I think this is interesting. I've highlighted this a couple times this week, but Pro Football Focus tracks tournament worthy plays. So it's not just like, was it an interception? It was like, should it have been an interception? Tournament worthy plays and then big time throws. And so for like a long time, Jameis Winston was like the barbell. He was like, would be one of the top 2 or 3 guys in the NFL in big time throws and lead the league in turnover worthy plays. And Drake May's kind of been the same this year. And it's not because he's a bad decision maker. It's like the Patriots are trying to keep him within the structure of the offense. And then they get to a point in the game where they're like, all right, just do your thing. Like do your Josh Allen thing, run around if you have to, throw the ball downfield if you have to. And so he's like willing to take risks into these tight windows that he's not scared to throw a pick, basically. And so that can lead to interceptions, but it can also lead to these big plays. And so if you think it's like Jameis Winston with lower passing volume, but with rushing upside. And so that's kind of how I think of Drake May. And yeah, I think that this is a good spot for him in a game that I expect the Rams to be able to score points. And so I expect the Patriots to have to stay aggressive. And honestly, I think the Patriots are becoming one of these whole is greater than the sum of the parts type teams where they're not the Cardinals, right? The Cardinals are currently like in the playoffs. They're in the driver's seat for the NFC West, but also you look at that roster and you're like, are they that good? And then they are, and it's like the Patriots they beat the Jets. They were competitive against, they got stomped by the Jags, but they beat the Bears handily. They were competitive in whatever this other game was in this stretch. Like, they're starting to come together and play well. I could see them keeping this game close. And, then that ends up being like a 24-21 type game or something where you get some nice production from the Patriots side.
So, yeah, speaking of Jameis Winston, I think he's going to be a higher owned quarterback this week as well. He's probably a guy I'm going to aim to be a little bit under the field on. I think New Orleans, sixth most rushing yards allowed per game, second most yards allowed per carry, and second most rushing touchdowns allowed. It seems like this could be, a Nick Chubb week, or it also seems like this could be a Saints defense week. Winston, 3 interceptions and 6 sacks last week. I think he's the last player to throw 30 interceptions in a season. Seems to be coming out with the same mentality. And actually, like you talked about the barbell, I think it's fine. I think Winston's a reasonable play. I'll probably roster him at about the field in my multi-entry set and maybe just not use him for if I do 5 or 6 single entry rosters. I may try to avoid using Winston. I think he'll be over-owned relative to the possibility he just goes out there and implodes. But I do think there is some tournament winning upside there as well. I guess thoughts on the Browns Saints game. Yeah,
I think I'll have him on. If I build 7 single entry 3 max rosters, I'll have him on one. The big question, you brought up the big question, right? It's like volume. If Jameis throws it 40 times, he's going to have enough big plays that you want him in a double stack, last year with Flacco, it wasn't even Ken Dorsey, right? It was Kevin Stefanski, who was more run leaning. And when Flacco came in, they were just like, all right, whatever, just throw it 40 plus times every game. Now Ken Dorsey calling plays, but then also Kevin Stefanski's still there and he'd like to be more run leaning. They have Nick Chubb. So I don't know how to read this spot, right? It won't surprise me if Jameis throws it 32 times. It won't surprise me if Jameis throws it 44 times. And that's really the big question of whether or not I want to play him. Because if he throws it 32 times, I don't want to play a pocket passer throwing it 32 times who like 3 of those are going to be picks, right? But if he's throwing it 44 times, he's going to go over 300 yards because he's just like chucking the ball downfield and he's going to have the touchdown. So yeah, I don't have a strong read on like how the Browns will handle this. And it really comes down to that volume component. So I definitely don't want to like predict myself out of money, right? Like, I can predict how they're going to do this. So yeah, even with the field is kind of how I would approach things. But also to me, I want to have him on some single entry 3 max, but probably not like my core guy, like my highest dollar contest, I definitely want exposure to him.
So I guess one more game that I kind of think along the lines of like the Cleveland, New Orleans, Rams, Patriots. It's Falcons, Denver. Is another game that I think I'll be playing some Bo Nix. I think he's going to see some ownership. And I think Cortland Sutton's going to be popular. Falcons third most receptions allowed per game, and ninth most receiving yards allowed per game, and third most receptions allowed per game. Eighth most receiving touchdowns allowed per game. I guess like thoughts on Atlanta, Denver. I am probably going to be there playing some Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, and I think it's like single entry worthy. He has some rushing upside as well.
Yeah, I've got Sutton in like my single entry pool. I don't have Nix, but I don't have like, it's not because I want to argue against him, I just think like Atlanta, they don't get pressure. They allow teams to drive the field. They allow tons of receptions, but they also they force everything short area. And, Nix has like 1 game over 246 passing yards, like 2 games over 220, something like that. I don't see him getting like to the tournament winning score without like, this isn't Carolina where there's just like open areas of field 20 yards down the field and he's just chucking it down there. And so it's harder for me to see him putting up like the 30 pointer. But I think he's kind of one of these guys that you have to jump over with your quarterback, as in he's going to be popular and he's probably going to score 17 to 24 points, And so it's like, I want to take the guys who have the potential to outscore him, but I'm also aware that there's a good chance that they don't outscore him. And I'm just like behind all those Bo Nix rosters. So no, yeah, he's very much in the bucket of like, I don't mind the play. He just doesn't quite make my list. I do think Cortland Sutton is, it was weird, right? He had that 0 target game. And since then I was filtering a lot of like last 3 to 4 weeks of the NFL stats for wide receivers because DeAndre Hopkins got traded from the Titans. Jameis Winston took over for the Browns. Amari Cooper got traded from the Browns. Cortland Sutton had that 0 target game, right? Like George Pickens, Russell Wilson took over for the Steelers. George Pickens, Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton, Cedric Tillman are all like outrageously far and above all other wide receivers in terms of usage metrics over the last like 3-4 weeks. So Cortland Sutton, ever since that 0 target game, they've just been like, oops, we made a mistake, like course correct. Cortland Sutton's the centerpiece of the offense again. So yeah, I think he's a really sharp way to go, and no arguments against Bo Nix. I don't think I'm going there myself, but I do think he's going to put up a solid game. I want to try to, I'm like, maybe Russ can outscore him. Maybe May can outscore him. Maybe James can outscore him. Like, I think one of these guys in his price range will probably outscore him. And so I'm going to go in that direction instead.
So a couple other games we should talk about. Seattle, San Francisco, big divisional game. I have in my notes for this game, I just have written Christian McCaffrey. I think that's the guy that I want to play for this game.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think there's a good chance that there's good amount of points to put up. Maybe not enough by Seattle to like win a tournament. And that San Francisco is just running the ball through. Like he looked like he was back. So I don't know. I guess is that your thought? Same thought for the game?
Yeah. I mean, I think you could chase 49ers pass catchers. I think Purdy's a fine play, but I think what would make you the most money over time would be Christian McCaffrey. So I think like for anybody, your starting point should be consider Christian McCaffrey. And then if you're playing MME or if you're playing 5 different single entry 3 max rosters, or even if you're just playing one roster and you're like, yeah, but I want to shake things up and go a different direction, then you go a different direction. But the starting point should be like, we play out the slate 100 times. McCaffrey's going to make you the most money. There are also scenarios in which Purdy stacks make you more money, in which this game plays out a different way. But to me, I'm mostly, or maybe even entirely, just leaning into Christian McCaffrey.
And the other big game, big AFC, Kansas City and Buffalo. Khalil Shakir is probably going to be the highest owned wide receiver, or one of the higher owned wide receivers. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, on him in particular, because I don't like usually race out to play wide receivers against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But we're seeing, Amari Cooper questionable, Dalton Kincaid out. I guess thoughts on Shakir. I feel like it's a situation. I'll give my thoughts first. I feel like it's a situation where numerically, Khalil Shakir is going to like show up in projections because the other guys are out. So people are like increasing target share or whatever to Shakir. But I think like Dawson Knox is just going to step in. And I think, if Amari Cooper misses, like Matt Collins is not Amari Cooper, but like he's going to get on the field as well. So is Curtis Samuel most likely. So they're like Khalil Shakir is like fine if I'm playing multiple pieces from this game, maybe. But I don't think I want to be using him like in a bunch of like other rosters, I guess. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. The Bills have what are we? They're 7-2. They played 9 games. Through 9 games, they've produced one DraftKings game of 20 plus points from a pass catcher through 9 games, and that was Khalil Shakir, and that was with Amari Cooper playing, which like took attention away from Khalil Shakir to where like he was actually able to function more, which Amari might play this week, but like I think that actually helped him quite a bit, Amari being on the field. No, I was surprised to see the ownership projections on him this morning, and I think what you said makes the most sense. It's like projection systems are going to like he's going to pop in projection systems. I'm not scared. Like, do I think there's a chance that he puts up 20 plus points? Yeah, definitely. I'm not at all scared though that like he's going to put up a score that it's like, oh man, I couldn't win without Khalil Shakir this week. And so for me, he's just like entirely off he's not in my player pool at all this week.
Yeah, I think if I'm playing Josh Allen, maybe Shakir is the most logical wide receiver to pair with him if Amari Cooper's out. But like I'm probably not going to be playing a ton of Josh Allen either. So yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on the game. I guess like other pieces that are maybe seeing higher ownership or that I'm interested in. Devin Achane, Dolphins playing the Raiders. I'm there with the field. I think he's going to be one of my higher owned running backs, probably along with Christian McCaffrey. It just seems like a situation where the Dolphins will want to run the ball against the Raiders. They can probably control this game, and they don't necessarily want to be exposing to a bunch of unnecessary hits if they don't need to. So I think I'm there with the field on Devin Achane. Your thoughts on Raiders and Dolphins?
Yeah. I mean, Achane, like I said before, I'm such a volume guy, right? You can get yourself into the trap of like looking at the volume and being like, I don't understand the magic that's happening here. How is he scoring? But like most guys are not scoring 4x their salary. Most guys are not putting up 25 plus points. We're not getting the production, like the 25% of the time production that we got in the past. Achane has 14 career games where he had a role and Tua was starting. In 8 of those 14 games, over half of those 14 games, he's put up 25 plus DraftKings points. Like he is so far and above, like from a production per game standpoint, like anyone else on this slate. It's like him and Christian McCaffrey, basically. Because so far, and I want to get your thoughts on Tyreek Hill, but like Tyreek Hill hasn't, last year Tyreek Hill hit 50%, just over 50% of the time. Last year, Justin Jefferson hit just over 50% of the time. But like the Vikings aren't throwing the ball with Darnold as often as they did with Kirk Cousins. And then their defense is better. So they're controlling games more. So like JJ hasn't gotten there once this year. He hasn't topped 27 DraftKings points once this year. So like Achane is hitting at a higher rate going back to last year than any other player available on this slate. And it's a great spot for him. So yeah, to me, he just makes a ton of sense as well.
I guess, looking at the other games, Minnesota and Tennessee is probably a game that I have interest in one player, is Calvin Ridley. Minnesota is allowing the 5th most receiving yards per game, 6th most, 5th most receptions per game, 6th most receiving yards per game. Ridley's been going berserk. I think that he's projected for some ownership. It wouldn't surprise me if he comes in a little bit under ownership projections, just because people are going to look at this game. Tennessee's implied point total. But it actually seems like a matchup where Minnesota might just let Calvin Ridley do Calvin Ridley things because they know they can still beat the Titans. Is that a play that you're interested in?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Sutton, Pickens, Calvin Ridley, Cedric Tillman, they're all like completely popping in usage metrics. And Ridley is just the offense now. They're just like, all right, yeah, let's just throw it to Calvin Ridley. He complained and we traded DeAndre Hopkins and all right, sure, all the time, throw it to him. And like you said, the Vikings, I mean, it's hard to run against them. So similar to a game against the Lions or a game against the Ravens where you're going to get passing volume. And, are they that concerned with like structurally, are they that concerned with like, oh, let's double team him and take him out of this game? Or is it more like, let's what the Vikings like to do is confuse the quarterback. So it's like, hey, let's just keep confusing the quarterback. Eventually, Levis is going to make mistakes. Yeah, he's going to hit some plays to Ridley. He's also going to make some mistakes, and pretty soon we'll be up 2 scores, and then Ridley's racking up even more like easy volume. So yeah, I like Calvin Ridley quite a bit this week.
That's pretty much all the guys on my list. Any other thoughts for the week?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you and I are really in sync on this week. I was curious your thoughts on Tyreek Hill, because it feels like the wrist issue, like that can't be why he's not producing in the box scores, because like he just has to get open. Like he just gets schemed open 30 yards downfield. I do like what you said. Like they're probably going to control this game, probably run the ball. Teams run the ball against the Raiders. Teams don't usually get the ball to perimeter wide receivers against the Raiders, but it just feels like if we were looking at last year's box scores, we would be like, oh, like Tyreek Hill, 50% owned. And we've had these couple of games with Tua back and the wrist issue and all this, like, isn't there a chance we get back to last year's box scores? Just want to see what your thoughts are on Tyreek Hill's situation.
It makes sense logically. I think I'm seeing the Raiders allow like the 6th fewest yards per catch. Probably going to wait another week. I don't know what the Dolphins' future schedule is. I do feel like that if Tyreek Hill's wrist is okay, he's going to have another major game, like a tournament-winning game. I don't know that it comes against the Raiders. I could be wrong. He'll certainly be represented in my multi-entry set. I don't know if I'll be looking to play him outside of Tua rosters, and I don't know if I'll be playing a ton of Tua. Like I'm much more interested in Devin Achane. But I don't know. It's a good point. Would we be shocked, right? If we, it's Sunday night. We're just looking like, oh yeah, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns from Tyreek Hill against the Raiders, of course. Like why did nobody go there? I do think that like some people always go there. And I think, so he's not going to see like no ownership. I'll probably play him at around the field. I don't think I'll play him in single entry. And it's really more of the game environment and matchup. But I am interested in like a Tyreek Hill week in the future. But yeah, it may not be this week. But I don't know. He's a good player to think about because he's probably not going to see as much ownership as he should either.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's a good point.
I think my Tyreek Hill interest is primarily fear-based, as in come on, what if he goes for 35? It's going to be so obvious in retrospect, and you don't have him. But also I try to avoid fear-based decision making because like you can't cover everything. If you try to cover everything, you're not going to win. And in fact, you're going to lose. And so if the only reason you're playing a guy is because you're scared to miss out, typically those are the guys you should avoid. But I just think he's such an interesting case study because why is he not hitting and can't he hit again? I know the Raiders are like, they've been good against wide receivers, but like, come on, Tyreek Hill is not just like an average wide receiver. So yeah, I think there's some interesting things to consider there. I think everything you said is sharp. He's probably not like a sharp way to go in single entry 3 max, but he's also not a not sharp way to go in single entry 3 max. Like it wouldn't be surprising if he hits for a big game. And so he has to at least be considered.
One thing to think about is I think he's $100 more expensive than Puka, who's probably going to see lower ownership. And I'd probably rather be more of the field on Puka because I like that game environment a little bit more. Like I'll be playing more Patriots probably than Raiders. And there's some other guys like George Pickens right around, a few $100 cheaper. Zay Flowers a few $100 cheaper. Like Calvin Ridley much less expensive. It's like it's not again necessarily against Tyreek Hill. There's just maybe other guys that want to be.
It's just weird that we've gotten to a point where we're like, yeah, but Puka Nacua and George Pickens and like their price right around Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just about do it for this week. Anything else?
No, that's it from my end. As always, appreciate you doing the show.
Sure. Yeah, and we'll catch you guys next week.